The wind off Lake Michigan cut through fabric like it had a personal grudge. Malachi Reed stood outside the diner with the cracked windows and flickering neon sign and buzzed like a dying wasp. 12 years old, 2 days since his last meal. His sneakers had split at the seams 3 weeks ago, duct tape holding the soles together now. The hoodie did nothing against November in Chicago. Inside, plates clinked. The smell of grilled cheese and tomato soup drifted through the door every time someone walked in or out. His stomach twisted so hard he had to lean against the brick wall. But he didn't move toward the door, didn't beg, just stood there reading a discarded business magazine someone had tossed in the alley, even though the words blurred because his hands shook from cold. His eyes didn't match the rest of him. Steady, observing, calculating. The door opened. A woman in her late 50s stepped out with a trash bag, her apron stained with coffee and grease. Loretta Caldwell. Her hands smelled permanently of dish soap. She'd seen every kind of desperate walk past this diner in 23 years. But something about this boy made her stop. He wasn't crying, wasn't performing. He was just there. Before welcoming you fully into this story, I need you to understand something. What happens next isn't about charity. It's about a debt that would take 15 years to settle. So if you're ready to see how a promise made with nothing becomes everything, stay with me. You hungry? She asked. Malachi looked up. Pride wrestled with survival in his chest. He could feel his ribs against his shirt. Yes, ma'am. She brought him inside, sat him at the counter near the heater, made him grilled cheese with extra butter the way her son used to like it before he moved to Atlanta and stopped calling. Tomato soup in a chipped bowl. Malachi ate slowly, like he was trying to make it last forever, like he didn't know when the next meal would come. The cooks watched. A regular customer at the end of the counter scrolled through his phone, barely noticing. When Malachi finished, he stood. Didn't say thank you the way most kids would. Instead, he looked Loretta straight in the eye and said something that made the entire diner go quiet. I will pay you back when I'm rich. One of the cooks laughed. The regular muttered, yeah, sure you will, kid. But Malachi didn't smile, didn't shrug it off. He said it like a contract, like he was signing something invisible in the air between them. Loretta waved him off gently, the way you do when a child says something sweet but impossible. Baby, just stay warm out there. He stepped toward the door, then stopped, turned back. I'm serious. Who makes a promise like that at 12, with nothing but duct tape shoes and a stomach that just remembered what food tastes like? Malachi wasn't born homeless. His mother, Shanice Reed, had been a night shift nurse's aide at Cook County Hospital. Exhausted every morning, invisible every afternoon. She worked doubles to keep their one-bedroom apartment on the south side. No savings, no backup plan, just work and love and the hope that it would be enough. It wasn't. She collapsed during a shift when Malachi was 11. Undiagnosed heart condition. Gone before the ambulance arrived. The same hospital she'd worked at for 9 years. Eviction came 4 months later. No family stepped in, no fundraiser went viral, just paperwork and silence. The foster system swallowed him whole, shuffling him through 3 homes in 2 years. Nobody expected much. Teachers described him as quiet. Administrators checked the at-risk box on his file. But Malachi had something most overlooked kids don't. Obsession. He read everything he could find about wealth. Not lottery fantasies or celebrity gossip. Structure, leverage, ownership. He studied case breakdowns on Oprah Winfrey, corporate moves by Reginald Lewis, investment strategies tied to Warren Buffett. Not because he worshipped them, because he wanted to decode the pattern. Wealth wasn't magic, it was math. And pain. A lot of pain. At 16, he failed algebra. The school counselor told him community college would be ambitious. His foster father, a man named Gary who smelled like motor oil and disappointment, told him over dinner one night, "Kids like you don't become CEOs. You get a trade, you survive." That night, Malachi sat in the basement bedroom with peeling wallpaper and believed it, for about an hour.
Then humiliation turned into fuel. He taught himself coding from free library computers, worked 2 part-time jobs bagging groceries and washing dishes, slept 4 hours a night. He applied for scholarships obsessively, 27 rejections. Then one small private grant took a chance. But rejection doesn't always break a person. Sometimes it builds one.
The day before Malachi left for college, he walked into the diner one last time. It was early afternoon. Loretta was refilling ketchup bottles, her reading glasses sliding down her nose. She looked up and recognized him immediately. Taller now, still too thin, but his eyes hadn't changed. "You're leaving," she said. "Not a question. Tomorrow." She smiled, tired but proud in that way people smile when they see something good happen to someone they didn't expect it for. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out 2 20s from her tip jar, held them out. "For books or whatever you need." Malachi stared at the bills like they were fragile. "I can't take that." "You can, and you will." He took the money, folded it carefully, put it in his jacket pocket. Then he looked at her again, and the weight in his voice made her set down the ketchup bottle. "When I make it, you won't have to work anymore." Loretta laughed. Not mean, just disbelieving. "Baby, you don't owe me anything." "I know, but I'm still paying you back." She didn't believe him. How could she? He was 18, heading to a mid-tier state school with a partial scholarship and $40 in his pocket. The world didn't work that way for kids like him. He left. The door chimed behind him. Years passed, and promises either fade or they harden into something unbreakable. Malachi studied finance at a university in southern Illinois that nobody outside the state had heard of. Not Ivy League, not even close, but it was a door. He worked campus security at night, studied during the day, and in between he noticed something that everyone else missed. Students with good ideas didn't fail because they were stupid. They failed because they had no capital. He started building a platform in his dorm room, a simple micro-investment app designed for people who couldn't afford traditional brokers. It rounded up everyday purchases to the nearest dollar and automatically funneled the spare change into diversified index funds. Small amounts, consistent growth, built for people the financial system ignored. He pitched it to his professors first. They dismissed it. Too niche, unscalable, low margins. He pitched it to local investors. They smiled politely and never called back. Then he pitched it to a venture capital panel in Chicago, a room full of men in tailored suits who looked at him like he'd walked in from the wrong building. One of them, a man named Trenton Hale, didn't even wait for the pitch to finish. "Your background doesn't scream leadership," Hale said, leaning back in his chair. "This is finance, not charity." The room laughed. Not loud, just enough. Malachi stood there, laptop still open, slides still glowing on the screen. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself. He just closed the laptop, picked up his bag, and as he walked out, he wrote Trenton Hale's name in the Notes app on his phone. Not for revenge, for reference. Malachi didn't quit. He partnered with small community banks that understood the market he was targeting. Credit unions in South Chicago, regional lenders in Detroit and Atlanta, people who'd been ignored by the same system that ignored him. The platform launched quietly. No press, no hype, just word of mouth in barbershops and church basements and break rooms. It grew. 3 years later, his app had 2 million users. 5 years later, 12 million. People who'd never owned stock, never thought about retirement accounts. Now they were building wealth 50 cents at a time. At 27, Malachi took the company public. Valuation hit $3.4 billion. The same people who'd laughed him out of pitch meetings now quoted him in keynote speeches. The same industry that dismissed him now invited him to panels. But something still sat heavy in his chest, because unfinished promises don't disappear. They wait.
And 15 years is a long time to wait.
The paint on the diner had started peeling 3 years ago. Now it looked like a building trying to shed its own skin. The neon sign still flickered, but half the letters were dead. Inside, Loretta Caldwell wiped down the same counter she'd been wiping for 26 years. 73 now. Hands that ached every morning. Back that didn't straighten the way it used to. A man in a pressed suit walked in carrying a letter folder. He didn't sit, didn't order, just stood near the register with the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Caldwell? I'm Derek Voss. I represent Presidio Development Group. We're acquiring properties in this block." Loretta kept wiping. Not interested. "We're offering $200,000. That's well above market value for a building in this condition." She looked up then. "I said no." He placed a business card on the counter. "Think about it. We'll be in touch." He left. The door chimed behind him. Loretta threw the card in the trash. 2 weeks later, a city inspector showed up, cited her for outdated electrical wiring, plumbing code violations, ventilation issues that had been ignored for years. The fines started small, then they grew. 1,000, 3,000, 8,000. Her neighbors on the block started selling, one by one. The barbershop, the laundromat, the corner store that sold loose cigarettes and scratches, all of them took the deal. Loretta stood alone. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday, taped to the front door in a yellow envelope. Court ordered, final. 30 days to vacate. No extensions, no appeals. Loretta sat behind the counter that night after closing, the notice spread out in front of her like a death certificate. Her regulars had stopped coming. The neighborhood had already moved on. Even the ones who used to sit here every morning with coffee and complaints had found new places to exist. The day the moving trucks arrived, a small crowd gathered outside, not to help, just to watch. Officials in uniform started removing equipment, the grill, the refrigerator, the coffee maker that had been there since 1998. Loretta stood near the register, hands shaking, watching her entire life get loaded into a truck. One of the officials, a younger man with a clipboard, avoided eye contact. "Ma'am, you need to step outside now." She didn't move, couldn't. Her knees buckled and she dropped behind the counter, hands pressed flat against the tile floor she'd mopped 10,000 times. She whispered it, not to anyone, just to the empty air. "This is all I have." The door chimed. A black SUV idled outside, tinted windows, engine still running. The door opened and a man stepped out wearing a charcoal overcoat tailored so well it looked like it had been sewn directly onto him. Confident stride, quiet presence, the kind of man who didn't need to announce himself. He walked straight through the door. The officials paused. The small crowd outside went silent. He moved past them like they weren't there and stopped at the counter where Loretta still knelt on the floor. He crouched down, looked at her with eyes she'd seen before but couldn't place. "You probably don't remember me," he said softly. She blinked, studied his face. Then something clicked. The shape of his jaw, the way he held himself, the eyes that didn't match the rest of him. "You're the soup boy." He nodded, stood, helped her to her feet with a gentleness that didn't match the expensive suit. "I told you I would pay you back." Loretta laughed, but it came out broken. "Honey, that was 15 years ago." "I know." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, thick, official. He placed it on the counter between them. "What is this?" "Open it." Her hands shook as she pulled out the paperwork, legal documents, deed transfers, trust agreements, words that didn't make sense at first. Then they did. He owned the building now. The debt had been cleared. Every fine, every citation, every manufactured violation designed to push her out. Gone. Malachi had purchased the building outright 3 days ago. The officials standing in the diner had no authority here anymore. Their permits were invalid, their trucks were trespassing. But he didn't stop there. He'd set up a retirement trust in Loretta's name, enough that she'd never have to work another day unless she wanted to. The diner would be converted into something new, the Loretta Caldwell Community Initiative. Free financial literacy classes, startup mentoring, small business grants for people who looked like he used to look, desperate, hungry, underestimated. The developer who'd been circling the block, Derek Voss, had been operating through predatory zoning loopholes. Malachi's legal team had already filed complaints with the city. An investigation had been triggered. Voss wouldn't be buying any more buildings in this neighborhood. Loretta pressed her hands to her face. Her shoulders shook, not from fear this time, from something she hadn't felt in years: relief. "You fed me when I was invisible," Malachi said quietly. The officials left. The crowd outside dispersed. And then Malachi turned toward the door where one more person stood, a man in his 50s, pale, thinner than he used to be, wearing a suit that didn't fit as well as it should have. Trenton Hale, the same man who'd humiliated him in that conference room a decade ago, who'd laughed when Malachi pitched his idea, who'd said his background didn't scream leadership. Hale had lost everything 2 years ago: reckless investments, over-leveraged bets. His firm collapsed, his reputation followed. He'd applied for funding from Malachi's foundation 6 weeks ago, didn't realize who chaired the board. Malachi looked at him. No anger, no satisfaction, just clarity. "Leadership isn't about background," Malachi said. "It's about vision." He approved the funding, but with conditions: strict oversight, mandatory mentorship requirements, accountability at every level. Not revenge, something better. Loretta sat by the window 3 months later. No apron, no aching hands wrapped around a dish rag. Just sunlight on her face and a cup of tea she didn't have to make herself. The diner had been gutted and rebuilt. New floors, new equipment, a classroom in the back where 20 people sat learning how to read a balance sheet. Malachi visited once a month. Never announced, just showed up, sat at the counter, ordered grilled cheese. One afternoon, a reporter showed up, asking questions. Cameras, microphones, the kind of attention that makes people uncomfortable. "What's next for you?" the reporter asked Malachi. He smiled. Not wide, just enough. This was a promise. My next move isn't. The reporter pressed. "But what does success look like now?" Malachi glanced at Loretta through the window. She was laughing with one of the students. Free, finally. "It looks like keeping your word." The cameras kept rolling. The story went viral. People shared it, commented, debated whether it was real. But the truth didn't need validation. It had already happened. Because here's what most people miss. Kindness doesn't disappear. It compounds. And 15 years is just interest accruing on a debt the world forgot about. If you believe promises still matter, if you think one act of grace can reshape a future, then subscribe and turn on notifications. Because stories like this don't just inspire, they prove that dignity wins. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about a time someone helped you when you had nothing. Your story might be the one that changes someone else's life. And remember this: the next billionaire might be the kid you ignored, or the one you fed.